What is the one thing that you found most interesting about the analysis you did on Hector and Helen?
It's just the level of understanding that they have of each other and the mutual respect they have. Because everybody who's around Helen fails to see that she is more than just a beautiful face. Everybody fails to see all the complexities that I just shared in who is Helen. And everybody fails to realize or appreciate or honor in Hector what is his honor, which causes him to fight. So nobody respects or realizes Helen is more than a beautiful face, and nobody honors or realizes or respects Hector's honor that is his motivator to fight. However, the only people that do recognize this is Helen and Hector and each other. And so, because of that, they have this unique relationship where it's not explicitly stated anywhere, but it's sort of like, I get you, chill, chill, yeah, yeah, like that type of thing going on. And yeah, that's two unlikely people come together and support one another, and there's no type of romance, there's no type, it's just genuine appreciation and understanding. And it's perhaps because each of them are denied certain things by other people that they are more willing to look past their differences that should divide them into supporting one another.
In regards to Helen being the person that Hector's brother Paris brings back to Troy as like his
Mm-hmm.
prize, or maybe she goes willingly. Um, how do you think that affects the relationship between Helen and Hector and how they may view each other?
She is what everybody pins the blame on. And so Hector, being the oldest son of Priam, is the general of the army and the leader of the army. And so you figure that he would be mad at her or also similarly place blame on her because, oh, I have to fight this war now, and like da 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 da. But no, he treats her very well. He treats her kindly. Like he doesn't go out of his way because he also can't alienate himself from the Trojan people, but he isn't harsh on Helen either because he understands that the war is not her fault, even though nobody else is able to look past that but Priam also. And even in book 24, when she's giving her funeral lamentation, Helen states that Hector and Priam were the only people who would not cower away from her, were the only people who would not call names at her. They were the only ones who were kind to her during her stay in Troy. So, yeah, so he recognizes that if Helen came willingly, if Helen did not come willingly, the war is not her fault. And he places blame more on Paris. And so bringing Helen back, or Helen arriving in Troy from Sparta, does not hinder the relationship between him and Helen, it more hinders the relationship between him and Paris. It more affects that relationship than it does with Helen. So there's a particular scene in book 6 where Hector has been told by the Trojan soldiers to return to the city to tell the Trojan women to start praying to the goddess Athena, so that way the Trojans may turn out victorious in the battle that they're currently fighting but losing against the Greeks. And along his way out to the city, he runs into Helen and Paris in their bedchamber while Hector is trying to find Paris and get him to come outside the walls as well to fight. And in this scene, Helen asks Hector to sit down next to her. And for a long time, scholars have just seen this as Helen attempting to seduce Hector in this moment. However, with the Helen that I've described, it does not make sense for her character and for her person to be doing this.
for it to be purely just on a seduction level. And so I decided to take a look at the Greek that was being said there to see if there's any type of truth that's being said there that the scholars aren't mentioning or aren't seeing. And what I found is the word that Helen uses for seat is diphros, and it's a compound word from duo meaning two and phros from pharaoh meaning to carry. And the word is more commonly used in the Iliad for chariot than it is for chair. So knowing this, I interpret this scene as not Helen trying to seduce Hector, but instead she is trying to send a coded message to Hector about Paris. So, knowing that, just to give some background context and everything, both Helen and Hector are upset with Paris, but for different reasons. In book 3, when Paris is sort of hiding behind the front lines, Hector finds him, and he's upset with him for not being at the front lines. First of all, because he's a Trojan prince, and first of all, because Hector blames this war on Paris. So he sees Paris as not taking his responsibility and not doing his duty and not having a sense of shame that would cause him to fight. Which for Hector, having that sense of shame and knowing your duty and then executing your duty is what makes Hector Hector, basically. It's very important to him. It's part of his identity, and it's what makes him him. So that's why Hector is upset with Paris. But in book 3, Helen can also be seen being upset with Paris, because all Paris wants from her is to have sexual intercourse, and she does not want to have sexual intercourse with him. She's very upset with him for not fighting Menelaus. So Helen and Hector are both upset with Paris. So then in book 6, when Hector enters the bedchamber, Helen then has both men in her presence in a rare meeting, because all three of them would not normally be in the same room together, or they are not usually seen together in the Iliad. So Helen, being Helen, she takes advantage of this opportunity to make a move and make it worthwhile, this meeting between all three of them. And so we already know that Hector wants Paris to fight, but then Helen also starts off her sort of monologue in this scene saying, I wish I would have been married to a better man, one who knows all the things of shame, I believe is the wording, don't quote me exactly though. So she would also like to see Paris fight and be more like Hector, basically. So when she asks Hector to sit down with her, because of the relationship that Helen and Hector have that has not yet been described in the Iliad but will be shown through this encounter, is she understands that Hector operates on shame and performing his duty is his top concern for his life. And so she knows that if she tries to dissuade Hector from going back outside the walls, or even take a little bit more time going back out to the walls, he's going to refuse. And so knowing that, and this is something that Andromache and Hecate, his wife and his mother, do not understand either, because when Hector approaches them in book 6 on his way back out to the city too, both of them do try and keep Hector in the walls for as long as possible, and he has to politely say, no, I must go back out. So the fact that Helen understands this is quite phenomenal, because it seems as if nobody or no woman around Hector seem to understand this except for her. So again, she knows that Hector is going to refuse, and in doing this, Hector will be an example for Paris on how he should also be refusing comfort and be outside the city and fighting. So, and the word diphros sort of hints to Hector that this is what Helen is doing. Helen is not trying to seduce him, because if she used a different word than diffros, it would perhaps be in a sexual connotation, because then she would be asking Hector to enter her sort of personal bubble, her personal space. But that's not what is happening here, because sort of with Diffros, it's like, let's get on our chariot together and work together to accomplish this thing that we both want. However, thankfully, Hector does pick up on Helen's message, because, and the way that I'm able to tell this is at the very beginning of the scene, Hector makes a direct address to Paris. But when Helen speaks, she makes an indirect address to Paris and talks about him as if he's not there. And then once Hector speaks again, he switches to talking about Paris as if he is not there as well, which is what Helen did. So he's also indicating, like, oh, I get your drift. I see what you're doing. We're talking about Paris as if he's not here, and I've picked up on your message. And in case that's not clear, he also uses the verb phileo, because he says, do not ask me to sit down although you are loving me. And the verb for love that's being used there is phileo, which is not a romantic sexual love. It's more like a dear, a tender love. And this is sort of the Greek love word that gets attached to platonic love, and it can be used for families, it can be used for friendship. It has no sexual connotation whatsoever. So the fact that Helen and Hector are able to share a coded message with one another is testament to the level of relationship that they do have, because in order for a coded message to work, you have to know the other person well. You have to have a sophisticated relationship with that person, and you have to be able to understand one another to have sort of non-verbal communication. Ta-da!
Is that it?
That's sort of the gist.
Okay.